I met him at Silverstone. I have had more inspiring conversations with my pot plants. And they're dead. I told him my wife hoped he would be world champion, and he gave me a look that made me think I inadvertently said, "You are the most disgusting human being I have ever had the misfortune to encounter." Later I tried again, asking him what he thought of the Mustang, which, judging by his reaction, translates into German as, "I know that you like little boys and I'm going to tell your team manager unless you give me some money." Had he driven a Mustang before? I asked, fully expecting another withering glance from the driver's seat. "Yes," came the reply. "Where?" I asked, not realizing that where in German means "I hope you fall into a combine harvester, you maggot-faced creep." The best-looking car of all time. And fast, too. 0 to 60 miles per hour took 5.4 seconds, and you could get the needle round to the 170 miles per hour quadrant on the M1, should you choose. There were no speed limits then, because homosexuality hadn't been invented. Given the choice, most of us would like to die peacefully in our sleep or heroically at the helm of a doomed airliner. But unfortunately, for every 100,000 people reading this, 1.4 are going to be sorely disappointed. Because you are going to be murdered. If that doesn't appeal to you, Niger looks good, at 0.2, but that's mainly because murderers, like everyone else, have such bad diarrhea. They're never off the lavatory long enough to do the deed. But more worrying still is that the 8th most common murder weapon in the UK is the motor vehicle. Let's face it, there are innumerable problems with making your getaway in the murder weapon. To have killed the man, you must have been doing at least 40 miles per hour. At that speed, your car will have sustained serious damage. And it's not so much the complication and expense of getting this repaired as the fact that while Claude might not have noticed you driving down the pavement, he sure as hell will spot a broken indicator lens and pull you over. The other problem is that cars are now being designed with pedestrian safety in mind, so that even if you do get him right between the headlights, he will almost certainly walk away with nothing more than light bruising. Look at the figures. Of the 43,000 people knocked down last year, fewer than 900 actually died from their injuries. Modern wipers are tucked away under the leading edge of the bonnet so that a flailing head is unlikely to connect with the bone-shattering nut that holds them in place. So if you must use a car as a murder weapon, choose the model carefully. Certainly, you should avoid the Daihatsu Sirion, which, in a recent Euro NCAP test, achieved a 3-star rating for both pedestrian safety and occupant protection. In other words, you are going to end up in the same shape as the man you hit. So what's good then? Well, you may be tempted by something with a pointy bonnet ornament, like a Rolls-Royce. You may also be interested to know that in Switzerland, the spirit of ecstasy is banned. Rollers are sold with smooth-topped May radiator grills. But don't get your hopes up, because in the free world, where there is no Nazi gold, it's designed to retract in the event of an impact. And you thought this was to stop people nicking it. It turns out that what you really need for killing newsagents is a short bonnet so that his head hits the windscreen. Good cars singled out in crash tests are the Ford Fiesta, Renault Clio, and Volkswagen Polo. The Audi A4 does well too, at last, a reason for buying one, as does the 5 Series BMW. Top of the tree, though, seem to be people carriers. The Peugeot 806, Chrysler Voyager and Vauxhall Citroën are killing machines to rival the UZ 9mm. I had flown to New Zealand and realized that the penny loafers I had packed might be a trifle unsuitable for scrabbling up a chunk of giantized magma. So I hurried into a sports shop hoping that I might buy a pair of comfy-sized Tims. But it wasn't that simple. "What did I want them for?" asked the man in the shop. Well, my feet really, I replied. No, no, no. What was I going to do in them? Well, sort of walk about. I sobered up enough to help judge the Cartier Concours competition, although I must say, it's jolly difficult to say which is the best 50s stock car racer. They all looked the same, broken. Another judge was the DJ Johnny Walker who, when I asked how he was, said, "Fine, apart from the cancer." It's difficult to know where you go with that, so I asked where it had bitten him. "In the arsehole," he said, and that really was the end of that. People write to Top Gear occasionally saying that my teeth appear to have got a suntan and that my hair's a mess. Clearly, they're mistaking me for someone who gives a damn. Some bloke last week wrote to say my brogues were dirty. How empty does your life have to be for you to care? And how doubly empty for you to be so enraged that you turn on your PC, write a letter of complaint and then go to all the bother of finding a stamp in an envelope? I have never, ever, cleaned a pair of shoes. I wear them. They disintegrate. I buy some more. The end. I don't know what goes with what and reckon that if you can't see my genitals, I'm well dressed. However, my wardrobe is far from a potpourri of any old rubbish. There are rules in there. Well, there's one, but that's all you need. My rule is, no car-branded stuff of any kind. My father used to have an M-Power belt, which was high to us enough. Dad, I used to say, as we trundled around in his Cortina, it would be better if you wore your trousers round your ankles. Even back then I knew that advertising a car you didn't actually own was poor form. I got one such missive only yesterday from some poor chap whose teenage, petrol-head son had taken the family Mercedes for a spin and killed himself in it. He enclosed a photograph of the wreckage, to hammer the point home. I'd love at this point to say that I simply toss these letters in the bin and scoff. But in fact, whenever I get one of these letters my shoulders sag. Only the other day, on the television, I joked that I'd never buy a car because it protected pedestrians well in an accident. There are, I explained, more important things to worry about, like how fast it goes and what it looks like. And, of course, the next week I had a barrage of mail from people whose children had been run over and killed. Each one made me feel absolutely fucking dreadful. What if one of my children were to be killed and then I had to watch some fat, balding oaf making jokes about it on television? I'd want to rip his throat out. I don't get cross when people use their mobile phones on the train. Usually because I'm miles away, in a car. We're getting used to them now, of course, but if you stop and think for a moment, how can it take 2 years to build 14 miles of road? The Romans could do 10 times better than that 2,400 years ago. No one you see working on the M25 these days is actually working. They're just walking around backwards in high-vis jackets, making sure that all the other health and safety officers don't fall over. In France, earlier in the day, I'd seen a pretty big crash. A small Toyota had plainly hit the central reservation and then buried itself underneath a large articulated lorry. Here, the road would have been shut for 2 hours while men in high-vis made sure the surface and the barrier were fine, whereas over there was a sign asking drivers to slow down a bit and that was that. They hadn't even closed a lane. And then there's the business of speeding. The French are having a crackdown, for sure, but when you are caught, the police don't act like you've just anally raped President Chirac. They just take 100 euros from your wallet and that's that. Get this. On a Radio 2 quiz the other day, a contestant was asked what happens to water at 32 on the Fahrenheit scale. After much uhing and ahhing, she said confidently, "It melts." I want you to think about this. The latest figures suggest that 18% of fatalities on the roads in 2004 were caused by drink driving, and that 34% were caused as a result of excessive speed. This means that 58% were caused by people who were stone cold sober and traveling well within both their limits and those of the car. The only conclusion we can draw from this is that the drivers in question were as stupid as a field full of bees, as daft as a brush. Perhaps they couldn't remember in the heat of the moment which pedal did what, or which way the wheel should be turned, or even that killing people is wrong. Shelby's given it a bash with mixed results. There's lots of power, 475 bhp, but the handling, steering and brakes remain untouched. Which means you're paying extra simply to have a bigger accident. Would it be possible to import this car, without causing all your friends to die laughing at you? Tell someone you drive a Mustang and no matter what it is, you'll come across as a bit of a local DJ. We think of it in terms of bullet. Everyone else thinks we look like we may be married to our sister. And do you really want a car with 2 stripes down the bonnet? And exhausts that sound like Katrina? Surely, this is the same as buying a television from the 70s. Why would you do that? Because you prefer the fuzziness of the picture to the high-def plasma you could have had? Because you like getting out of your chair to change the channel? Or is it because you wanted something that sets fire to your house if you leave it on for more than an hour or two? It's cheapness that causes people to buy a 4WD Kia. They need something to pull their caravan up the muddy field, and while they'd like a Range Rover, it's too expensive. That makes perfect sense to me. If I were a caravanist, with a family to feed and a modest income, I'd probably buy a Kia. No, come to think of it, I wouldn't. If I were a caravanist, with a family to feed and a modest income, what I'd actually do is kill myself. So, when you buy a modern Porsche, you are demonstrating to the world that you are very interested in driving. And being very interested in driving means that, for you, it's a hobby. This is bad. Hobbies are for people who were caught masturbating as a child. They were told by their mothers that it'd drop off unless they got out of bed and did something useful. So they did. So now I have my quads, and I'm simply amazed at what damage they can do to a man's bottom as they move about. Fields are not flat, they are ripply, and these ripples are transferred directly into your buttocks, so that after a surprisingly short amount of time, you are in agony. I know that motorcyclists, such as James May, enjoy this sort of thing, but I don't. I hate airports. I wish someone would start an airline called I'll Take My Chances Air. It would work on this principle. You drive up to the door of the plane, you get on immediately with no checks whatsoever, and then it takes off. If it blows up and it will have been a small price to pay.